The great crystal towers of Nexus Prime reached toward the stars like frozen lightning. Each tower held millions of beings from across the galaxy. Today was special. Today marked another 1,000 years of peace under the Galactic Council's rule. Chancellor Vorthak stood before the Grand Assembly. His crystalline body caught the light from 3 suns and threw rainbows across the massive hall. Representatives from 12 different alien species sat in perfect rows, listening to his words. "My fellow beings," Vorthak said, his voice echoing through translation devices. "We gather today to celebrate our greatest achievement. For 30,000 years, our galaxy has known peace. For 30,000 years, we have grown strong together." The audience made sounds of approval. The Kelthanor delegates clicked their claws against their armor. The Merloth representatives created musical bubbles in their water tanks. The energy beings called Plumons flickered brighter. Each species had their own way of showing happiness. "But we must never forget why this peace exists," Vorthak continued. "Long ago, a great threat tried to destroy everything we built. A species that spread like fire across the stars, a species that could not be reasoned with or controlled." The hall grew quiet. Everyone knew this story. It was told to young ones across the galaxy as a warning. "The humans," Vorthak said the word, like it tasted bad. "They appeared from nowhere and took over star system after star system. They fought each other constantly, but when faced with other species, they united. They were dangerous because they could not be predicted." General Kexmar of the Kelthanor stood up. His insect-like features were hard and cold. "My ancestors fought them directly. The humans were clever and cruel. They used weapons we had never seen. They turned our own people against us with lies about freedom and equality." "Yes," Vorthak agreed. "They spoke of making all species equal. But we knew the truth. They wanted to rule over us. They wanted to make us into slaves, just like they enslaved each other on their homeworld." Dr. Lim Ara of the Merloth raised a fin. Her tank of water allowed her to speak through special equipment. "The historical records show that humans spread to over 40 star systems in just 200 years. No species had ever expanded so fast." "Exactly," Vorthak said. "That is why our ancestors made the hard choice. They put aside old fights and worked together. The Great Alliance was formed with one goal: to stop the human threat before it could destroy everything. The war had lasted 50 years. Every species contributed ships, weapons, and soldiers. The humans fought back with everything they had, but they were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. One by one, their colonies fell. Their ships were destroyed. Their people were scattered to the solar winds. The last human stronghold fell exactly 30,000 years ago today," Vorthak announced. "Not one human survived. Not one human ship escaped. The threat was ended forever." Cheers filled the hall. The celebration would last for days across every council world. Children would learn again about the brave alliance that saved the galaxy from the human plague. But in the deepest levels of Nexus Prime, someone was not celebrating. War chronicler Velmoth of the Kelthanor walked through the restricted archives. His job was to keep the old records safe and make sure certain information stayed hidden. The archives were huge. Millions of data crystals held the complete history of the galaxy. Most citizens never saw these records. Some information was too dangerous for public knowledge. Velmoth stopped at a section marked with warning symbols. These crystals held everything the Council had learned about humans. Battle reports, captured technology, intercepted communications. It was all here, locked away from curious eyes. He picked up one crystal and inserted it into a reader. The holographic display showed a human ship design. The technology was strange, but effective. Humans built things differently than any other species. Their ships were ugly but incredibly tough. Their weapons were simple but devastating. Another crystal showed intercepted human communications. Velmoth had studied the human language for decades. He was one of only 3 beings in the galaxy who could still read it. The messages were disturbing. Project. Endurance is ready for final phase, one message read. If we fall, the children of Earth will remember. They will come back when the time is right. Velmoth had found dozens of similar messages. The humans seemed to believe they could somehow survive total destruction. It was impossible, of course. The Alliance had been very thorough. Every human world was checked multiple times. Every asteroid field was searched. No humans had escaped. Still, the messages worried him. Humans thought differently than other species. They planned for situations that seemed impossible. They never gave up, even when defeat was certain. He moved to another section of crystals. These held technical data about human science. Most of it made no sense, even to the Council's best researchers. Humans used mathematics that other species had never discovered. They built machines that worked in ways that seemed to break natural laws. Quantum encryption protocols, he read from one file. Time delay activation systems. Probability cascade generators. The words meant nothing to him, but they sounded dangerous. The worst part was that some of the human technology was still active. Over the years, Council scientists had found human data caches that were still running programs. The computers worked for thousands of years without maintenance. Some files were locked behind codes that no one could break. A few years ago, one of those codes had finally opened. Inside was a message in human language. Phase 1 complete. Monitoring protocols activated. See you on the other side. The message made no sense. Phase 1 of what? Monitoring what? The other side of what? Velmoth had reported it to his superiors, but they told him to ignore it. Dead species could not send messages. Still, he kept finding more active systems. More locked files, more mysterious messages. It was like the humans had hidden pieces of themselves throughout the galaxy, waiting for something. Velmoth closed the files and returned the crystals to their storage units. His job was to keep the records safe, not to worry about ghosts. The humans were dead. The Council had made sure of that. 30,000 years of peace proved it. But as he walked back through the archives, he could not shake a strange feeling. The human records felt different from other historical files. They felt like they were still alive somehow, still watching, still waiting. Outside the archives, the celebration continued. Beings from across the galaxy sang songs of victory and peace. Children played games about brave Alliance soldiers defeating the evil humans. The galaxy was safe, prosperous, and united. No one knew that in the deepest, darkest corners of space, something was stirring. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. Something that remembered every ship destroyed, every world burned, every life lost in the Great War. The humans were coming home, and they had learned so much during their long absence. The alarm sounds echoed through the bridge of the Kelthanor scout ship Razor Wind. Commander Zeftol looked at the sensor readings and felt his blood turn cold. Something massive was hiding in the Void Reach, a region of space that the Council had marked as empty for thousands of years. "Report," Zeftol ordered, his claws gripping the command chair. "Sir, We are detecting a structure approximately 12 kilometers in diameter, said his sensor officer. The energy readings are off. Our scales, whatever it has been running on full power for a very long time. Zeftol studied the data. The void reach was supposed to be empty space between galaxies. Nothing lived here. Nothing could live here. The nearest star was light years away, and there were no planets or asteroids to provide resources. How did our deep space sensors miss something that large? He asked. It appears to be using some kind of advanced stealth technology, sir. Our computers estimate the cloaking field has been in place for thousands of years, but it is finally failing. The structure slowly became visible on their main screen. It was unlike anything in the Council databases. The hull was dark gray with strange patterns that seemed to shift and move. Energy waves rippled across its surface like water. At certain angles, it almost seemed to disappear completely. Send a message to Fleet Command, Zeftol ordered. Tell them we have found something that requires immediate investigation. Within hours, a full scientific expedition arrived. Dr. Linkara of the Merloth led the research team. Her people were experts at analyzing ancient technology. If anyone could figure out what they had found, it would be her. The mathematical principles behind this construction are completely foreign, Dr. Linkara reported after her initial scans. The whole material appears to be made from elements that do not exist in our periodic table. The energy signature suggests technology that is thousands of years ahead of our current capabilities. Could it be a precursor artifact? Asked Zeftol. The precursors were a mythical race that some scientists believed had seeded the galaxy, with life billions of years ago. Possibly, Dr. Linkara replied. But there are aspects of the design that seem almost familiar. I cannot explain it, but some of the mathematical constants match patterns in our oldest historical archives. Commander Zeftol decided to send a boarding party to investigate. 3 small ships approached the massive structure, looking for an entrance. As they got closer, the hull began to glow with soft blue light. "Sir, the structure is scanning us," reported the lead pilot. "It appears to be analyzing our ship designs and biological signatures." Suddenly, weapons emerged from hidden compartments in the structure's hull. They were unlike any weapons the Council had ever seen. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they seemed to fire concentrated gravity waves. Defensive positions. Zeftol shouted, but it was too late. The first Council ship simply crumpled like paper. The gravity waves compressed its hull until it was no bigger than a small asteroid. The second ship tried to retreat, but invisible forces grabbed it and pulled it apart piece by piece. The third ship activated all its shields and weapons, but they had no effect. The structure's defenses reached through the shields as if they were not there. "All ships retreat immediately," Zeftol ordered. "Maintain maximum distance." The surviving ships fled to a safe distance while the massive structure returned to its dormant state. The weapons disappeared back into the hull. The blue glow faded. It was as if nothing had happened, except for the debris of 3 Council ships floating in space. "What kind of technology can ignore our shields?" asked the sensor officer. "I do not know," Zeftol admitted. "But whatever built that thing, they were far more advanced than us." Dr. Linkara studied the sensor data from the attack. The gravity weapons had torn through the ship's hulls by manipulating space itself. The power required for such weapons was beyond anything the Council could produce. "Sir, I am detecting something else," said the communications officer. "The structure is sending out signals. Very faint, but they appear to be some kind of data transmission. Can you decode them?" "Not yet, sir. The encryption is incredibly complex. Our computers estimate it would take several thousand years to break the code using conventional methods." Zeftol made his report to Council Command. Within days, the discovery was classified at the highest levels. Teams of the galaxy's best. Scientists were assembled to study the structure from a safe distance. But the more they learned, the more worried they became. The structure showed signs of being inhabited. Life support systems were active. Power flowed through corridors and chambers that could hold thousands of beings. Most disturbing of all, the structure appeared to be waking up. Energy levels are increasing by 2% every day, Dr. Linkara reported to the Emergency Council session. Whatever is inside, it is becoming more active. Could it be a weapon? Asked General Kexmar. It could be anything, Dr. Linkara replied. The technology is so advanced that we cannot predict its capabilities. What we do know is that it has been hidden out here for a very long time, and now something has triggered its awakening, Chancellor. Vorthak studied the reports with growing concern. The timing was suspicious. The structure had remained hidden for thousands of years, but it began to reveal itself just as the Council was celebrating their greatest victory. It felt like more than coincidence. What about the signals it is sending? He asked. We have made some progress on the encryption, Dr. Linkara said carefully. Some of the mathematical patterns are starting to make sense. But, sir, what we have decoded so far is disturbing. Explain. The signals appear to be activation codes. They are being sent to specific coordinates throughout the galaxy. We believe there may be other hidden structures receiving these transmissions. The council chamber fell silent. The idea that there might be multiple structures hidden throughout their territory was terrifying. If each one had the same defensive capabilities, the council's entire military would be useless against them. There is something else, Dr. Linkara continued reluctantly. Some of the decoded patterns match fragments in our historical archives. Specifically, they match certain human technological signatures that we captured during the war. The silence in the chamber became absolute. The word human was forbidden in most contexts. To suggest that this structure might be connected to the extinct species was almost unthinkable. That is impossible, General Kexmar stated firmly. We destroyed every human ship, every human world, every human base. They are extinct. I am only reporting what the data shows, Dr. Linkara replied. The mathematical constants, the encryption methods, even the basic design principles all show similarities to captured human technology. But evolved, advanced, as if someone took human science and perfected it over thousands of years, Chancellor. Vorthak felt a chill run through his crystalline body. The humans had been clever and unpredictable. They had planned for situations that seemed impossible. Could they somehow have planned for their own extinction? Double the sensor sweeps, he ordered. I want every empty system searched. If there are more structures out there, we need to find them before they fully activate. But deep inside the massive structure, processes that had been running for 30,000 years were finally completing their cycles. Stasis pods that had protected their occupants through millennia of waiting began their revival sequences. Computers that had been analyzing galactic civilization for longer than most species had existed prepared to wake their sleeping masters. And in the deepest chamber of the structure, a man named Hyunwoo opened his eyes for the first time in 30,000 years. The first thing he saw was a message on the screen next to his pod. Revival successful, all systems operational, target civilization located and analyzed, ready for Phase 2. Hyunwoo smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. The humans had kept their promise. They had returned when the time was right, and now, finally, it was time to collect what was owed. The stasis pod hissed as its seals broke for the first time in 30,000 years. Hyun-woo felt warmth return to his body as the revival systems worked to bring him back to life. His muscles were weak from the long sleep, but his mind was sharp. The pod's medical systems had kept his brain active during hibernation, allowing him to dream and plan while his body rested. Around him, thousands of other pods were opening. The sound filled the massive chamber like rainfall on metal. Men and women who had volunteered for the longest military mission in human history were returning to consciousness. They had agreed to sleep for millennia while their enemies celebrated victory. Now their patience would be rewarded. "Status report," Hyun-woo said as soon as his throat could form words. "All systems operational, Commander," replied the station's artificial intelligence. The voice was warm and familiar. It had been his companion during the brief moments of consciousness the pod allowed every few centuries. Revival of primary. Crew is 97% complete. All station defenses are active. Long-range sensors confirm target civilization has developed as predicted. Hyun-woo pulled himself from the pod and walked to the command center on unsteady legs. Through the massive transparent walls, he could see the stars. They looked the same as they had when he went to sleep, but he knew that everything had changed. The galaxy was no longer home to humanity. Now it belonged to the creatures that had destroyed his people. Dr. So-min was already at her station, studying data streams that had been collecting for 30,000 years. She looked exactly as she had when they entered stasis, but her eyes held the weight of millennia. Like Hyun-woo, her mind had been allowed to wake periodically to oversee the station's development programs. "The enemy has grown complacent," she reported without looking up. "They call themselves the Galactic Council now. 12 species working together to control hundreds of worlds. Their technology has advanced, but at a normal rate. We are approximately 10,000 years ahead of their current capabilities." "What about their military strength?" "Impressive by pre-war standards, they command fleets of millions of ships. Their ground forces number in the trillions. However, their weapons and defenses are based on principles we mastered before entering stasis. Our current technology makes their entire military effectively obsolete." Hyun-woo nodded. This was what they had planned for, while the galaxy celebrated peace. Humanity's greatest minds had spent 30,000 years perfecting the art of war. Their artificial intelligence systems had solved problems that would have taken living scientists millions of years. Their manufacturing systems had developed materials that broke the known laws of physics. "Sir," called Tae-jin from the intelligence station, "the passive sensors have identified several interesting developments. The enemy has built a capital world called Nexus Prime. All their major leaders live there. They hold regular celebrations of our destruction." "How thoughtful of them to gather in one place," Hyun-woo replied coldly. The station's main hall was filling with awakened humans. They wore simple gray uniforms, but these were not the same people who had entered stasis so long ago. The medical systems had improved their bodies during the long sleep. They were stronger, faster, and more resilient than baseline humans. Their minds had been enhanced to process information at superhuman speeds. They were still human, but they were human perfected. Captain Daeho approached from the engineering section. "All manufacturing systems are online, sir. We can begin full production immediately. The resource collectors have been gathering materials for millennia. We have enough raw matter to build a fleet larger than anything the galaxy has ever seen. How long until we can deploy?" "That depends on what you want to deploy, sir. Basic ships can be ready in hours. More advanced systems will take days. If you want something truly special, give me a week." Hyunwoo turned to the main display, which showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked council worlds. Blue dots showed the locations of hidden human facilities that had been activated by their arrival. There were dozens of them, scattered throughout enemy territory like sleeping landmines. "They think they won," he said quietly. "They think they destroyed us completely. They tell stories to their children about the evil humans who threatened galactic peace. They have built their entire civilization on the lie that we deserved to die." Dr. So-min joined him at the display. "The historical records we intercepted show that they have enslaved dozens of species since the war. They use some as workers, others as food, others as living computers. Everything they accused us of, planning, they have actually done. Then they will understand our justice perfectly." The awakening process continued for 3 days. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and civilians emerged from their long sleep to find a galaxy that had forgotten their existence. But they had not forgotten the galaxy. They had watched every battle, recorded every political change, analyzed every technological development. They knew their enemies better than the enemies knew themselves. On the 3rd day, Hyunwoo called a general assembly. 10,000 humans gathered in the station's main hall to hear their commander's words. They were the last pure humans in the galaxy, the final remnant of a species that had once dreamed of exploring the stars in peace. "My friends," Hyunwoo began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space, "we have slept for 30,000 years. We have dreamed of this moment through centuries of darkness. Today, we begin the final phase of our mission." The crowd listened in perfect silence. These people had volunteered for this mission, knowing they would never see their homeworld again. They had sacrificed everything for the chance to balance the scales of justice. The galaxy believes we are extinct. They have built their peace on our graves. They rule over hundreds of species while telling themselves they are heroes. Today, they learn that justice delayed is not justice denied. Weapons specialist Eun-ji had spent the past 3 days reviewing their arsenal. Human science had not stopped developing during the long sleep. Automated systems had continued researching, testing, and perfecting new methods of warfare. They now possessed weapons that could reshape reality itself. "We could destroy them all in a single day," she reported. "Our current weapons could crack planets, collapse stars, or erase entire fleets from existence. We have the power of gods at our disposal." "But we are not gods," Hyunwoo replied. "We are humans. We fight for justice, not destruction. We will give them the same chance they gave us, the opportunity to surrender with dignity. And if they refuse," Hyunwoo's expression hardened, "then they will learn why humanity survived when they thought we were destroyed. They will learn why we spent 30,000 years preparing for this moment. They will learn that some debts can only be paid in full." The first phase of their plan was simple. They would reveal themselves to the Council and offer terms. The galaxy's rulers would have the chance to peacefully surrender and face judgment for their crimes. If they refused, humanity would demonstrate why their confidence was justified. But first, they needed to gather intelligence. Small reconnaissance teams began preparing for deployment to Council space, using technology that could phase through matter and ships that bent light around themselves. They would study their enemies up close. "Remember," Hyunwoo told the teams as they prepared to depart, "we are not conquerors. We are justice incarnate. We fight not for territory or resources, but for the memory of every human who died in the war. We fight for the enslaved species who suffer under Council rule. We fight for the idea that no species has the right to destroy another. As the first human ships left Omega Station in 30,000 years, their crews carried with them the hopes and dreams of an entire species. They had been patient. They had been careful. They had been forgotten. But now they were ready to remind the galaxy that humanity was not so easily erased from existence. The Council had celebrated their victory for 30 millennia. Now it was time to show them what defeat truly looked like. Tae-Jin materialized on the surface of Nexus Prime like a shadow given form. His enhanced body moved through the bustling alien streets without making a sound. No one could see him. No one could hear him. The phase technology that allowed him to exist between dimensions made him invisible to all Council sensors. He had volunteered to be one of the first humans to walk on enemy worlds in 30,000 years. The feeling was strange and terrible. These streets had been built on the bones of his species. These beings celebrated their lives on the graves of humanity. Through his neural implant, he recorded everything he saw. The crystal towers reaching toward the sky. The floating vehicles carrying important officials. The massive screens showing news from across the galaxy. All of it would be analyzed by the intelligence teams back on Omega Station. First observation report, he whispered into his communicator. The capital city shows no military presence. They feel completely safe here. Security is minimal and focused on petty crime rather than serious threats. Tae-Jin moved through the government district like a ghost. His enhanced hearing picked up conversations in dozens of alien languages. The universal translator in his implant converted everything to human speech. What he heard made his blood burn with anger. The mining quota from Sector 7 has increased again, one Vextari official said to another. The Korthani workers are dying faster than expected, but we can always get more from their breeding facilities. What about the Pelvari computational slaves? Asked the second official. Are they still processing the navigation data for our expansion fleets? Yes, though we may need to replace their brain implants soon. The constant calculations are burning out their organic processors. Tae-Jin had to force himself to remain calm. The Council was doing exactly what they had accused humanity of planning. They were treating other species as tools and resources rather than living beings. The hypocrisy was stunning. He moved deeper into the government complex, following the officials to their meeting chambers. What he found there was even worse. The Council's leaders were planning new conquests. They had identified several independent species that could be brought into the galactic community through force. The Yiltok resistance has been broken, General Kexmar reported to the assembled Council members. Their homeworld is now ready for resource extraction. We estimate 10,000 years of valuable minerals before the planet is depleted. Excellent, Chancellor Vorthak replied. What about the inhabitants? Most died during the pacification process. The survivors will be relocated to work camps on asteroid mining stations. They should provide several decades of useful labor before replacement becomes necessary. Tae-Jin recorded every word. This was evidence that would be broadcast across the galaxy when the time came. The Council had built their peace on slavery and genocide, just as humanity had predicted they would. Meanwhile, on Omega Station, Engineer Dae Ho was leading a different kind of infiltration. His team had successfully hacked into the Council's quantum communication network without being detected. The enemy's cybersecurity was impressive by pre-war standards, but humanity had spent 30,000 years perfecting their digital warfare. Capabilities. We are now monitoring all Council communications in real time. Daeho reported to Commander Hyun-woo. Their military codes, political discussions, scientific research, we can see everything they do before they do it. What have you learned about their defensive capabilities? They rely heavily on shield technology and energy weapons. Their ships are well armored but slow. Their tactics focus on overwhelming enemies with superior numbers rather than superior technology. Most importantly, they have never faced an enemy that could match their combined strength, so they have grown overconfident. Dr. So-min was analyzing the psychological profiles of council leadership. Each species had different motivations and fears. The Vextari were obsessed with maintaining their economic dominance. The Kelthanor lived for military glory and conquest. The Murloth prized scientific knowledge above all else. They maintain unity through careful balance, she explained. Each species gets something they want in exchange for cooperation, but there are deep tensions below the surface. The Vextari resent sharing economic control. The Kelthanor want more military authority. Several smaller species feel excluded from important decisions. Can we exploit these divisions? Absolutely. But first we need to understand how they will react to our return. I suspect their initial response will be panic followed by aggressive overreaction. They will try to destroy us quickly before we can organize any kind of resistance. Hyun-woo nodded. Which is exactly what we want them to try. Back on Nexus Prime, Tae-jin had discovered something that made his mission even more important. Hidden in the deepest levels of the government archives were the complete historical records of the human war, not the sanitized versions told to the public, but the real records showing every detail of the 50-year conflict. The files revealed the true scope of the Council's victory. They had not simply defeated humanity in battle. They had systematically hunted down every human survivor, destroyed every human artifact, and erased every trace of human civilization from the galaxy. It had been genocide on a scale that was almost incomprehensible, but more importantly, the files also contained captured human technology and research data. The Council's scientists had been studying human innovations for 30,000 years, trying to understand how such a primitive species had been so difficult to defeat. They still do not understand us, Tae-jin reported. Their psychological profiles of humans are completely wrong. They think we were driven by simple aggression and territorial expansion. They never realized that we were fighting for survival and the right to exist peacefully among the stars. His exploration of the archives revealed another important fact. Some of the human data files were still active. Even after 30,000 years, human computer systems embedded in captured technology were still running background programs. The Council's scientists had never been able to completely shut them down. Sir, I think I have found something, Tae-jin said into his communicator. There are human programs still running in their archives. They appear to be quantum encrypted and designed to activate when specific conditions are met. What kind of conditions? I cannot tell from here, but the encryption signatures match the ones we use for delayed activation protocols. I think our predecessors left us presents scattered throughout Council space. This was better than they had hoped. The humans who died in the war had not gone quietly into extinction. They had left hidden systems and programs throughout enemy territory, waiting for the day when their people returned. It was one final act of defiance that had gone undetected for millennia. Over the following weeks, human reconnaissance teams spread throughout Council space. They were invisible observers, recording everything and learning the secrets that the galaxy's rulers thought were safe. They mapped military installations, identified key infrastructure, and cataloged the weaknesses in every major system. Most importantly, they made contact with the enslaved species that the Council preferred to keep hidden, the Korthani workers in the deep mines. The Pelvari computational slaves with their burned-out minds, the Sindal who were raised as livestock for alien dinner tables, dozens of species that had been written off as extinct or primitive. The situation is worse than we imagined, reported reconnaissance team leader Min Su. The Council controls over 60 enslaved species. Most of the galaxy believes these peoples are extinct. The few who know the truth are too afraid to speak out. Are any of them capable of resistance? With the right support, yes. Many have maintained underground networks and resistance cells. They have been waiting for an opportunity to fight back, but they lack the weapons and technology to challenge their oppressors. Hyunwoo felt a familiar anger building in his chest. The same anger that had driven humanity to volunteer for impossible missions 30,000 years ago. The same anger that had sustained them through the long night of exile. The galaxy's rulers had learned nothing from their victory over humanity. They had simply become the monsters they claimed to be fighting against. Then we will give them that opportunity, he decided. But first we need to announce our return. The Council needs to know that humanity has come home. The final phase of their reconnaissance mission involved planting monitoring devices throughout Council space. These quantum transmitters would allow the humans to observe everything that happened after they revealed themselves. They would see how the enemy reacted, how they planned their response, and how quickly they could mobilize their forces. When the surveillance network was complete, Hyunwoo called his senior staff together for the final briefing. "We have seen enough," he told them. "We know our enemy's strengths and weaknesses. We understand their psychology and their capabilities. Most importantly, we have confirmed that they deserve everything we are about to do to them." "When do we begin?" asked Dr. Somin. Hyunwoo looked at the tactical display showing Council space dotted with their monitoring stations. 30,000 years of preparation were about to be put to the test. "Tomorrow," he said simply. "Tomorrow we remind the galaxy that humanity is not so easily forgotten." Chancellor Vorthak was enjoying his morning meditation when the impossible happened. He sat in his private chamber atop the highest crystal tower on Nexus Prime, surrounded by security systems that could stop an army. No living being could enter this room without his permission. No weapon could reach him here. That was why he nearly shattered when he opened his eyes and saw a human standing 3 meters away. The being looked exactly like the historical records described. Bipedal, with brown hair and dark eyes that seemed to hold the weight of millennia. He wore a simple gray uniform with no visible weapons or equipment. Most disturbing of all, he was smiling. "Hello, Chancellor," the human said in perfect Vextari. "My name is Hyunwoo. I believe we need to talk." Vorthak's crystalline body flashed through every color of panic as he reached for his emergency communicator. His hands passed right through it. In fact, his hands passed through everything in the room except the floor beneath his feet. Somehow, the human's presence had made him unable to touch anything. "Do not worry," Hyunwoo said calmly. "This is just a temporary effect of our meeting technology. You are perfectly safe as long as you remain calm." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out in every major council facility. General Kexmar found a human woman standing in his war room while he planned military exercises. Dr. Lim Ara discovered a human man watching her work in her laboratory. Every important council leader, scientist, and military officer suddenly had an impossible visitor. The panic was immediate and total. Security forces rushed to protect their leaders, but their weapons passed harmlessly through the human visitors. Force fields meant to contain any possible threat had no effect. The humans simply stood there, waiting patiently for their hosts. to accept the new reality. On Nexus Prime, Vorthak finally managed to activate his emergency communications with his voice commands. Security alert! Intruder in the Chancellor's chamber! Deploy all units immediately! That will not be necessary, Hyunwoo said. Your security forces cannot touch us. We are not physically present in this room. We are projecting ourselves through quantum entanglement from a location that your forces cannot reach. Impossible, Vorthak whispered. No species has that kind of technology. No council species has that technology, Hyunwoo corrected. But then, we were never part of your council, were we? The realization hit Vorthak like a physical blow. The facial features, the body structure, the impossible technology. It could only mean one thing. But it was impossible. It had been 30,000 years. You are human, he said in horror. Very good. Yes, we are human. We are the species you tried to wipe from existence 30,000 years ago. We are the children of Earth, and we have come home. Reports flooded in from across council space. Humans had appeared in the throne rooms of kings, the command centers, of admirals, and the research facilities of lead scientists. Everywhere they manifested, they delivered the same message. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. General Kexmar was the first to attempt violence. He drew his plasma weapon and fired directly at the human woman in his war room. The energy beam passed through her as if she were made of light. I am Captain Yunji, she said without flinching. I was the weapons officer aboard the last human, battleship destroyed in your war. I watched my homeworld burn from orbit before your forces killed my crew. Do you remember that day, General? Kexmar's claws shook as he tried to reload his weapon. You are dead. All humans are dead. We made sure of it. You made sure of most of us, Yunji agreed. But not all. Some of us were chosen to survive. Some of us were chosen to remember. Some of us were chosen to return when the time was right. Dr. Limara had a different reaction. As a scientist, she was fascinated despite her fear. How are you doing this? The quantum mechanics alone should be impossible. The human in her laboratory was Dr. So Min, the chief scientist from Omega Station. Your species understands quantum mechanics quite well, she replied. But you think in terms of what is practical and profitable. We had 30,000 years to think in terms of what is necessary and possible. 30,000 years? Where have you been? Waiting, learning, growing, preparing for this moment when we would remind the galaxy that humanity is not so easily erased. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Leaders who had been scattered across dozens of worlds appeared as holograms in the Great Assembly Hall, all talking at once about the impossible visitors they had received. This has to be some kind of trick, insisted Trade Minister Kylvin of the Merloth. The humans are extinct. This is probably an enemy species using their appearance to frighten us. No enemy species has this technology, replied Admiral Zonkar of the Kelthanor. I fired every weapon in my personal arsenal at the creature. Nothing touched it. This is beyond anything in our databases. Chancellor Vorthak called for order. We need to determine if these beings are truly human or some unknown species masquerading as our ancient enemy. We are human, said a new voice. Every being in the hall turned to see Hyunwoo standing in the center of the assembly floor. He had not been there a moment before. He had simply appeared as if he had always been there. I am Commander Hyunwoo of the Human Defense Force, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall without amplification. I was born on Earth 200 years before your forces destroyed my homeworld. I volunteered for the Endurance Protocol, a mission that required sleeping for 30,000 years while waiting for the right moment to return. The Endurance Protocol? Whispered Dr. Limara. That matches references in the captured human archives. You claim to be human, General Kexmar said, standing and pointing at Hyunwoo. But humans were primitive, violent, limited. You cannot possibly have the technology to do what you are doing. Hyunwoo's smile was cold as winter. You are correct that we were primitive 30,000 years ago. We had only just learned to travel between stars. We were still fighting among ourselves over resources and territory. We were everything you said we were. He began walking around the assembly hall, his eyes meeting those of every council member. But you made one critical error in your assessment of our species. You assumed that our flaws were permanent. You believed that we could not grow, learn, or change. You thought that destroying our worlds would end our story. We have monitored your civilization for 30,000 years, Hyunwoo continued. We have watched you grow fat and comfortable on the bones of the species you have enslaved. We have seen you commit the very crimes you accused us of planning. We have recorded every act of genocide, every species reduced to slavery, every world stripped bare for your profit. The hall erupted in protests and denials. Council members shouted about the peace they had maintained, the prosperity they had brought to the galaxy, the stability of their rule. Hyunwoo raised his hand, and silence fell like a physical weight. You speak of peace, but 63 species live in chains under your rule. You speak of prosperity, but it is built on the suffering of trillions of enslaved beings. You speak of stability, but it is the stability of the grave for those who dare to resist your authority. These are lies, Chancellor Vorthak declared. We liberated those species from primitive conditions. We brought them civilization and order. Did you? Hyunwoo asked. Did the Korthani ask to be liberated into your mining camps? Did the Pelvari beg to have their mines burned out, serving as living computers? Did the Sindal request to be bred as livestock for your dinner? Tables. The specific details sent waves of shock through the assembly. This information was classified at the highest levels. Only the inner circle of council leadership knew about the true status of the enslaved species. How do you know these things? Demanded General Kexmar. Because we have been watching you, Hyunwoo replied. For 30,000 years, we have been recording your crimes. Every secret meeting, every classified order, every hidden atrocity. We know exactly what you are and what you have done. Even if that were true, Chancellor Vorthak said, trying to regain control of the situation. What can you possibly do about it? You are few, and we are many. Even with advanced technology, you cannot stand against the combined might of the entire galaxy. Hyunwoo's expression grew serious. Chancellor, you have made two fundamental mistakes in your reasoning. First, you assume that our goal is conquest. We do not want to rule the galaxy. We want justice for the crimes you have committed. And the second mistake? You assume that we are few. Hyunwoo gestured, and the air around him shimmered. Suddenly, the assembly hall was filled with humans, thousands of them, standing in neat rows throughout the chamber, all wearing the same gray uniforms, all looking directly at the council members with expressions of calm determination. We are not few, Hyunwoo said quietly. We are the children of every human world you destroyed. We are the survivors of every ship you burned. We are the inheritors of every dream you tried to kill. and we have come to collect a debt that has been 30,000 years in the making. The projections vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving only Chancellor Vorthak's answer came 6 hours before the deadline. The Council's combined fleets, numbering over 2 million ships, jumped into the void reach with weapons charged and shields raised. If the humans wanted a war, they would have one. "This is Chancellor Vorthak of the Galactic Council." He broadcast toward the coordinates where Omega Station had been detected. "You have threatened the peace and stability of the galaxy. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." There was no response for several minutes. Then space itself began to change. What the Council fleet saw defied every law of physics they knew. The area around Omega Station started to glow with soft blue light. The light spread outward like ripples on water, but instead of moving at the speed of light, it seemed to move at the speed of thought. "Sir, we are detecting massive energy buildups," reported Admiral Zonkar from his flagship. "The readings are beyond our sensors' ability to measure. All ships, prepare for battle," ordered General Kexmar. "Deploy attack formation Omega. Ready all weapons." That was when they saw their first human warship. It materialized from nothing, appearing in the space between one moment and the next. The ship was impossible to look at directly. It seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, its hull shifting and flowing like liquid metal. It was only 2 kilometers long, tiny compared to the Council's massive dreadnoughts, but it radiated power like a miniature star. "Target the human vessel," Kexmar commanded. "All ships, open fire!" 2 million ships fired at once. Energy beams that could crack planets, missiles that could destroy moons, and gravity weapons that could tear apart asteroids all converged on the single human ship. Nothing happened. The weapons passed through the ship as if it were not there. Or perhaps the ship was not where it appeared to be. The human vessel continued its approach, completely unaffected by the combined firepower of the galaxy's greatest military force. "Impossible," whispered Admiral Zonkar. "Our sensors show direct hits, but there is no damage." "Fire again," Kexmar ordered desperately. The second barrage had the same result. The human ship continued forward, and now more ships were appearing around it. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of vessels that seemed to mock the very idea of conventional warfare. Then the humans fired back. What they used could not really be called weapons in any traditional sense. They were applications of physics that the Council species had never imagined. One human ship fired what looked like a beam of pure darkness. Where it touched Council vessels, they simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, they were edited out of reality itself. Another human ship released something that looked like silver mist. The mist flowed through space toward a group of Council dreadnoughts. When it reached them, the ships began to change. Their hulls twisted and reformed, their weapons turned into harmless sculptures, their life support systems became gardens of impossible flowers. A third human vessel did something even stranger. It fired what appeared to be a beam of light, but when the beam struck its targets, the Council ships began moving backward through time. The crews watched in horror as their vessels undid every action they had taken in the past hour, rewinding through space until they occupied positions they had held before the battle began. "Retreat!" Chancellor Vorthak screamed over the communications network. "All ships, retreat immediately!" But retreat was no longer possible. The human ships had surrounded the entire Council fleet using technology that allowed them to be in multiple places at once. Space itself had become a trap, with the laws of physics twisted to serve humanity's will. Dr. So Min watched the battle from Omega Station's command center with professional interest. The quantum displacement weapons are performing within expected parameters, she reported to Hyunwoo. The temporal reversal systems are functioning correctly. The reality alteration beams are operating at 97% efficiency. Casualties? Hyunwoo asked. 0 on our side. Approximately 15% of the enemy fleet has been neutralized. The remainder are experiencing various forms of non-lethal incapacitation. Good. Begin Phase 2. Phase 2 involved demonstrating capabilities that went beyond mere military technology. Human ships began to reshape the battlefield itself. They moved asteroids around like children's toys. They lit new stars to provide better illumination. They created artificial planets in empty space, complete with atmospheres and ecosystems. One human vessel approached the largest Council dreadnought and did something that broke the minds of everyone watching. It reached out with beams of structured energy and gently disassembled the massive ship bolt by bolt, sorting the pieces into neat piles while keeping the crew safe in protective bubbles. "How are they doing this?" Admiral Zonkar asked in despair as he watched his fleet being methodically dismantled by forces he could not understand. Dr. Lim Ara, monitoring the battle from her laboratory, tried to make sense of the readings. The energy signatures suggest they are manipulating fundamental forces directly. They are not using technology in any sense we understand. They are making reality obey their will through some form of applied consciousness. The demonstration lasted exactly 1 hour. When it was over, the Council's massive fleet had been reduced to helpless spectators floating in space. Their ships had been disabled, not destroyed. Their crews were unharmed, but trapped inside vessels that no longer responded to their commands. Hyunwoo's voice echoed across every ship in the fleet simultaneously. "This concludes our first demonstration. As you can see, your military forces are not capable of threatening us. However, we did not return to the galaxy to wage war on helpless enemies." New image appeared on every Council ship's communication screen. It showed the interior of Omega Station, where thousands of humans worked at stations that looked more like art installations than military equipment. "For 30,000 years, we have prepared for this moment," Hyunwoo continued. "While you celebrated your victory over us, we used that time to perfect sciences that your species will not discover for millions of years. We have learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level, to travel through dimensions you cannot perceive, and to reshape reality according to our will. But our greatest achievement is not technological. Our greatest achievement is wisdom. We have learned the difference between justice and revenge, between strength and cruelty, between leadership and domination." The image changed to show scenes from across the galaxy. Council worlds where enslaved species toiled in misery. Mining operations where workers died by the thousands. Breeding facilities where intelligent beings were raised like livestock. You have had 30,000 years to prove that you learned from your victory over humanity. Instead, you have become everything you accused us of being. You have enslaved dozens of species, destroyed countless worlds, and committed genocide on a scale that we never imagined possible. Therefore, we are implementing a new order. The age of the Galactic Council is over. The age of true freedom begins now." What happened next demonstrated the full scope of human capabilities. Across the galaxy, automated systems began activating on every Council world. These were not weapons or bombs, but something far more sophisticated. Liberation machines. On the mining worlds, the human systems began freeing the Korthani workers and providing them with advanced technology. On the computation planets, they healed the burned-out minds of the Pelvari and gave them ships to return to their homeworlds. On the breeding worlds, they liberated the Sindal and helped them establish their own settlements. But the humans did more than just free the enslaved species. They gave them weapons, not crude energy blasters or primitive missiles, but refined instruments of war that made Council technology look like stone knives. The former slaves found themselves equipped with personal shields that could stop any Council weapon, vehicles that could travel faster than light, and manufacturing systems that could produce anything they needed. "This is impossible," General Kexmar broadcast to the human fleet. "Where did you get the resources to arm so many species simultaneously?" "We have been preparing for 30,000 years," Dr. Somin's voice replied. "We have mining operations in dimensions you cannot reach, manufacturing facilities that exist outside normal space-time, and resource networks that span multiple realities. Material scarcity is a problem we solved millennia ago. The revolution spread faster than the Council could respond. Entire sectors declared independence within hours. Species that had been enslaved for thousands of years suddenly possessed technology superior to their former masters. The carefully maintained balance of power that had kept the Council stable for millennia collapsed in a single day. But the humans were not finished. Their final demonstration was the most profound of all. They began to heal the galaxy. Worlds that had been strip-mined for millennia suddenly bloomed with new life as human technology restored their ecosystems. Species that had been driven to the brink of extinction found their populations mysteriously growing. Stars that had been dimmed by industrial exploitation began shining brighter as human systems repaired the damage. The Galactic Council's emergency session lasted 3 days without break. What remained of their leadership huddled in the deepest bunkers of Nexus Prime, surrounded by every defensive system they could activate. None of it mattered. If the humans wanted to reach them, no force in the galaxy could stop them. Chancellor Vorthak looked around the table at his fellow council members. Many chairs were empty. Some leaders had fled to distant worlds. Others had attempted to negotiate separate peace agreements with the humans. A few had simply vanished, possibly taken by their own people who blamed them for the current crisis. "We need to face the truth," said Dr. Limara, her voice hollow with exhaustion. "Our military is useless against them. Our technology is primitive compared to theirs. Half the galaxy has already joined their cause. We cannot win this conflict. We can still negotiate," insisted Trade Minister Kylvan. "They said they want justice, not conquest. Perhaps we can reach some kind of agreement." General Kexmar slammed his fist on the table. "Agreement? They have destroyed everything we built. Our fleets are disabled. Our colonies are in revolt. Our entire civilization is collapsing. What do we possibly have to offer them?" "Our surrender," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Admiral Zonkar entering the chamber. His armor was scarred and his face was grim. He had been one of the last military commanders still fighting the human advance, but something had clearly changed. "Report," Chancellor Vorthak ordered. "The human fleet has reached the inner systems," Zonkar replied. "They gave me this message to deliver to the Council." He placed a small device on the table. It activated immediately, projecting a hologram of Commander Hyun Woo. "Leaders of the Galactic Council," the recording began. "Your military resistance has ended. Your enslaved populations are free. Your colonies have declared independence. The old order is finished. However, we believe in justice rather than revenge. We do not seek to destroy you, but to ensure that your crimes are answered for. We therefore invite you to participate in a trial before the newly formed Galactic Federation of Free Worlds." The hologram paused, letting the words sink in. "You will be judged by representatives of every species in the galaxy, including those you enslaved. You will have the opportunity to defend your actions and present evidence in your favor. The proceedings will be conducted according to the highest standards of justice. The alternative is exile. You may retreat to your homeworlds and live out your remaining years in isolation. Your expansion capabilities will be permanently disabled, but you will be allowed to maintain your current populations and technology levels. You have 48 hours to decide. Choose wisely." The hologram faded, leaving the council chamber in silence. "A trial," whispered Dr. Limara. "They want to put us on trial." "For what crimes?" demanded General Kexmar. "We brought peace and order to the galaxy, did we?" Chancellor Vorthak asked quietly. "When I think about the past 30,000 years, what did we really accomplish? We enslaved 63 species. We strip-mined hundreds of worlds. We committed genocide against anyone who resisted. Our expansion. Those were necessary actions for galactic stability," Kexmar insisted. "Were they? Or did we simply become the monsters we once fought against?" The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The Council's power was broken, their military was defeated, their empire was crumbling around them. They had only two choices: face judgment or accept exile. In the end, it was Dr. Limara who cast the deciding vote. "I have spent my life studying the universe," she said. "I have always believed that knowledge and truth were the highest values. If we truly believe our actions were justified, then we should be willing to defend them before an impartial tribunal. And if we are found guilty, then perhaps we deserve whatever judgment awaits us." The trial was held on Omega Station itself, in a chamber that the humans had constructed specifically for this purpose. It was vast enough to hold representatives from every species in the galaxy, with translation systems that could handle thousands of different languages simultaneously. The defendants sat in a special section where they could see and be seen by everyone present. Chancellor Vorthak, General Kexmar, Dr. Limara, and the other surviving council leaders faced their accusers with what dignity they could maintain. The prosecution was led by freed slaves who told their stories in voices that shook with pain and anger. Korthani miners described working until their bodies collapsed in the deep tunnels. Pelvari computational slaves spoke of having their minds burned out serving as living computers. Sindal survivors testified about being bred like livestock for alien dinner tables. "My people lived in peace for thousands of years before the Council found us," said Elder Rixtol of the Korthani, his body bearing the scars of decades in the mines. "We had cities of crystal that sang in the wind. We had art and music and poetry. The Council destroyed all of it in the name of efficiency. They told us we were being civilized," added Dr. Velnara of the Pelvari, her voice synthesized through a machine because her organic vocal cords had been removed to make room for computational implants. "They said our minds were too valuable to waste on individual consciousness. They turned us into living computers and called it progress. The evidence was overwhelming. Video recordings of atrocities, audio files of council leaders discussing the final solution to rebellious species, technical specifications for breeding facilities and processing centers, document after document proving systematic genocide and enslavement. The defense argued that their actions had been necessary for galactic peace. They claimed that the enslaved species had been primitive and violent before Council intervention. They insisted that the sacrifices of the few had enabled prosperity for the many. The galaxy was chaos before we brought order, Chancellor Vorthak testified. Species fought constant wars over resources and territory. We ended that violence and created a stable civilization that lasted for 30,000 years. At what cost? Asked the presiding judge, a human woman named Judge Su Jung. How many species did you destroy in the name of peace? How many worlds? Did you strip bare in the name of prosperity? We did what was necessary, Vorthak replied, but his crystalline form had dimmed noticeably during the proceedings. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Every piece of evidence was examined. Every witness was heard. Every argument was considered with careful attention to justice and fairness. But the outcome was never really in doubt. The defendants are found guilty of crimes against sentience. Judge Sujung announced to the assembled representatives, specifically, they are guilty of genocide, enslavement, systematic oppression, and crimes against the fundamental rights of all thinking beings. However, this tribunal also recognizes that the defendants believed their actions were justified. They were products of a system that valued power over compassion, control over freedom. While this does not excuse their crimes, it does inform our decision about their punishment. The sentence is as follows. The convicted individuals will spend the remainder of their natural lives in service to the species they harmed. They will work to repair the damage they caused, to rebuild the worlds they destroyed, and to restore the cultures they attempted to erase. They will not be imprisoned or executed. Instead, they will be given the opportunity to earn redemption through service to others. They will work under the supervision of those they wronged, and their progress toward redemption will be measured by their willingness to truly understand the harm they caused. It was a sentence that no one had expected. Not death, not imprisonment, but the chance to make amends for 30,000 years of oppression. Some of the council leaders accepted their fate with dignity. Dr. Limara volunteered to help rebuild the Pelvari computational networks using her scientific knowledge to heal minds that had been damaged by council technology. Others, like General Kexmar, raged against the verdict. "This is not justice," he declared. "This is humiliation designed to break our spirits." "No," replied Elder Rixtol, speaking for the victims. "Justice would be making you suffer as we suffered. This is mercy. This is the chance to prove that you can be more than the monsters you became." As the trial concluded, Commander Hyunwoo addressed the assembly one final time. "Today marks the end of one era and the beginning of another. The age of domination is over. The age of cooperation begins now." We did not return to the galaxy to rule it. We returned to ensure that no species ever again faces the choice between submission and extinction. The Federation of Free Worlds stands ready to welcome any species that commits to these principles. To those who choose exile instead of redemption, we respect your decision. You will be allowed to live in peace on your homeworlds. But know that the galaxy is moving forward without you. To those who choose to join us in building something better, we offer our knowledge, our technology, and our friendship. Together, we can create a civilization worthy of the stars themselves. As the representatives dispersed to carry word of the trial's outcome to their homeworlds, the galaxy stood at a crossroads. The old order was dead. What would replace it remained to be seen. 5 years had passed since the trial that changed the galaxy forever. Commander Hyun-woo stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching ships from dozens of species dock peacefully at the orbital facility. Each vessel represented a member world of the Galactic Federation of Free Worlds, the government that had replaced the old council system. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human quantum technology provided the foundation, but every member species had contributed their own innovations. Merloth bioarchitecture created living spaces that adapted to their occupants' needs. Pelvari computational networks managed traffic flow with restored minds that worked by choice rather than force. Even former council species like the Vextari had contributed their expertise in energy distribution systems. The morning reports, Director General, said his aide, a young Korthani named Zilven, whose crystalline horns sparkled with health and happiness. 5 years ago, she had been dying in the deep mines. Now she served as one of the Federation's top diplomatic coordinators. Hyun-woo accepted the datapad and scanned the updates from across the galaxy. The transformation had been remarkable, but it was far from complete. Building a just civilization from the ruins of an oppressive empire required patience, wisdom, and constant vigilance. "How are the integration programs proceeding?" he asked. "Better than expected," Zilven replied. 47 former Council worlds have requested full Federation membership. The rehabilitation centers report that 73% of enslaved populations have successfully returned to independent living. Most importantly, we have had 0 incidents of species-based violence in the past 6 months. That last statistic was particularly meaningful. In the early days after liberation, there had been calls for revenge against former oppressors. Some freed slaves wanted to enslave their former masters. Some minor species wanted to claim territory from major ones. The humans had worked tirelessly to channel that anger into constructive change rather than destructive vengeance. "What about the exile worlds?" Hyun-woo asked. "Mixed results," Zilven admitted. The Kelthanor homeworld has maintained strict isolation. They refuse all contact and seem to be developing their own defensive technologies. The Vextari have been more cooperative, but they still struggle with the concept of equality among species. "And the redemption programs?" Zilven's expression brightened. "Those are going much better than anyone expected. Dr. Limara has made extraordinary progress with the Pelvari Mind Restoration Project. Her team has successfully healed over 10,000 damaged consciousness matrices. The former slaves say she works harder than anyone to undo the damage she helped cause. That was the most surprising development of all. Many of the convicted council leaders had thrown themselves into their redemption work with genuine dedication. They seemed to finally understand the true scope of the harm they had caused, and they were determined to spend their remaining years making amends. "What about General Kexmar?" "Still refusing to participate," Zilven said sadly. "He maintains that the Council's actions were justified and that this entire process is an elaborate form of torture. The Korthani elders have assigned him to debris cleanup in the outer mining systems, but he works with minimal effort." Hyun-woo nodded. Not everyone could be redeemed. Some individuals were too invested in their old beliefs to accept new truths. But even Kexmar was contributing something, however reluctantly, to repairing the damage he had helped cause. Dr. Somin approached from the science section of the station. Her work had shifted from weapons development to terraforming and ecological restoration. The same genius that had created humanity's most devastating weapons was now bringing dead worlds back to life. "Hyun-woo, we have received some interesting signals from the Galactic Rim," she reported. Long-range sensors are detecting structured radio transmissions from beyond our current exploration range. Other civilizations? Almost certainly. The IADO signal patterns suggest multiple species working together to send coordinated messages. They appear to have detected the changes in our galaxy and want to make contact. This was both exciting and concerning. The galaxy had barely finished healing from 30,000 years of oppression. Contact with new species could bring opportunities for trade and cultural exchange, but it could also bring new threats. What do the signals say? We are still working on translation, but the basic message seems to be a request for peaceful contact. They identify themselves as the Andromeda Cooperative, a group of species from the neighboring galaxy who have been watching our transformation with interest. Hyunwoo considered this development carefully. First contact with alien civilizations was always delicate, but the Federation had advantages that previous galactic governments had lacked. They had learned from humanity's mistakes and the Council's crimes. They understood the importance of approaching new species with respect rather than suspicion. Begin preparing a response, he decided. Make it clear that we welcome peaceful contact, but that we will not tolerate aggression or exploitation. Include our fundamental principles about species equality and voluntary cooperation. Already done, Somin replied with a smile. I took the liberty of crafting a message that explains our history and our values. I thought it might be useful for them to understand how we went from a galaxy ruled by oppression to one governed by justice. Captain Tae-jin appeared at the meeting area, having just returned from a patrol mission along the outer territories. His ship had been investigating reports of unauthorized mining operations in systems that were supposed to be protected wilderness areas. The illegal mining was being conducted by a group of unaffiliated operators, he reported. No major species involvement, just individuals trying to profit from the chaos of transition. We shut down the operation and redirected them toward legitimate employment opportunities. Any resistance? None. When they saw our ship, they immediately assumed we were going to execute them for violating Federation law. They were quite surprised when we offered them jobs in the official mining cooperatives instead. That reaction was unfortunately common. Many beings still expected the Federation to operate like the old Council, ruling through fear and punishment. It took time for people to understand that the new government genuinely preferred rehabilitation to punishment. How are the new colonies developing? Hyunwoo asked, changing the subject to more positive news. Remarkably well, Tae-jin replied. The Sindal have established 3 new settlements in the Kepler sector. They are using human agricultural technology to create sustainable food systems that could feed millions. The Korthani have built a beautiful crystal city on Minerva Prime that serves as a cultural center for artistic exchange between species. Engineer Daeho joined the group, carrying a tablet full of construction reports. His work had evolved, from building weapons platforms to designing space habitats that could house millions of beings while maintaining perfect ecological balance. The Harmony Ring project is ahead of schedule, he announced proudly. When completed, it will be the largest artificial habitat in galactic history. 15 million beings from over 50 species will live together in a self-sustaining environment that produces zero waste and actually improves the space around it. Any conflicts during construction? A few minor disputes about architectural styles and living space allocation, but nothing that could not be resolved through discussion and compromise. The resident species have formed committees to manage their own affairs, and they seemed genuinely excited about creating something new together. Hyunwoo felt a deep satisfaction as he listened to these reports. This was what they had dreamed of during the long years of exile. not conquest or revenge, but the chance to build something better than what had been destroyed. "There is one more item," Zilvin said hesitantly. "We have received a communication from the deep archives on Earth." The name still carried emotional weight for every human in the Federation. Their homeworld had been the first target of the Council's genocide campaign. The planet had been reduced to a lifeless rock, its atmosphere burned away, and its oceans boiled into space. What kind of communication? The automated systems we left behind have detected something. Deep beneath the planet's surface, in the quantum bunkers we thought were destroyed, there are signs of activity. It appears that some of our people may have survived the bombardment. The group fell silent. The possibility that humans had somehow survived on Earth itself was both wonderful and terrifying. If there were survivors, they had been alone for 30,000 years, believing that they were the last of their species. "How many?" Hyunwoo asked quietly. "Unknown. The signals are faint and heavily encrypted, but the quantum signatures are definitely human, and they appear to be responding to our return to galactic prominence." Dr. So-min was already working on her tablet, running calculations and probability analyses. If they survived the orbital bombardment, they would have had to go very deep underground. They might have developed into a completely different branch of humanity adapted for subterranean life, or they might have found ways to preserve themselves that we never